All right, so I think it's kind of gross and weird how much we romanticize and like glorify childhood in America. I don't know if it's in other parts of the world, but people are always get all like soppy about like, oh, my childhood was the best time ever, and I wish I could go back and like, oh, it's just such a time of ease and innocence and carefreedom and when you look at like a lot of these reasons like why people choose to reproduce intentionally or like the rationales that they give, sometimes people will say something like, I really want to experience the world again, I want to discover things again through the eyes of my child for the second time. um, and so I don't know, like, I mean, I find that to be just really bizarre. Number one, you're using your child as a means to an end for you to have a certain kind of experience, which I think is pretty much always what happens when people reproduce intentionally. They're always trying to have this kid to have this experience for themselves, right? Assuming that they make the choice. I guess a lot of people just kind of go do it because it's the thing that most people do. But this whole childhood thing, like, it's not as easy and innocent and carefree as people make it out to be, right? Because, I mean, obviously there are a lot of people that experience like abuse or neglect like more than most people would probably think. And for me, I had a good childhood. I did not experience any kind of abuse or neglect. I was supported by my parents and everything. And yet, I still remember, like, plenty of negative emotion during that time. I remember um, I was very concerned about, like, following the rules. I was very concerned about, like, authority being disappointed in me, whether that was, like, teachers or like my parents or even God. Like, I was very concerned that I was gonna like say or think the wrong thing, and that my soul was gonna go to hell forever, and all that stupid bullshit. So like, even me who had a very like you know supported and safe childhood still had experienced like a fair amount of negative emotion. And I also remember, being very acutely aware of the other kids around me, and wanting to be liked and wanting to, be close to them and all that kind of stuff. And I also remember sort of the weirdness of, like, as I started to get old enough to have these thoughts and feelings that were separate or like hidden from my parents. Like the question, like the weird feelings of like, there are a lot of things I'm not telling my parents, and sort of that growing apart from them and becoming my own individual person. I remember that being like kind of weird, and kind of uncomfortable, right? So that was, I don't know. Those are just some reasons why, like, for me, I there are things I'm nostalgic for, like um, Final Fantasy VII, like these different things, but it's like I'm not one to celebrate or revere or wax poetic about childhood, and I think it's kind of gross when people do that. Um, there is this innocence thing, right? When people talk about childhood, and so if people really do like believe in and revere that innocence so much, then like why would you bring them into the world to be defiled and to lose that innocence? That's something I find weird. Um, and I think also a lot of this comes as a result of like the changing economic kind of situation, the changing world political situation, because if you look back several hundred years ago in developed countries, or even today in like a lot of developing countries, people had kids because they didn't have access to birth control and they wanted to have sex, or they had kids because they like needed farm hands, they needed help economically, or they needed kids to go to work in the factory to be able to make ends meet and stuff. And they also had a lot of kids because they're statistically, like, a lot of them died in childbirth, a lot of them died in infancy, a lot of them didn't make it to 10 years old to 30 years old. And so that's a big reason why they had a lot of children back then too, which is not great. So, I think another weird sort of like delusion that I see around childbearing, in addition to this celebration of innocence, or this like cult of innocence and child worship and whatever, um, is this like sort of like delusion of a future or of eternal life. You know, a lot of people, obviously it's kind of a trope where like they don't really accomplish anything in their life, but so they kind of like offload their ambitions and their hopes and dreams onto their child and put this pressure on them to fulfill those, right? And so that's obviously like one common manifestation of this delusion for a future. um, I think another way is like, we are, I would say, within the next couple hundred years, maybe sooner, maybe a little bit later, but heading for collapse as, a human civilization, I would say. And I think a lot of people just, they will not accept that. They kind of are like, well, Elon Musk will figure something out. Like, we're going to have some technology. We're going to make it. We do have a future as a human race. Um, and so that's to me, like, the truth is, like, things are going to collapse, like, and I think most of humanity is gonna, like, the human race will end eventually, right? There's no question about that. It's a matter of when, whether it's climate change, whether it's you know some asteroid or nuclear war or whatever. I personally think it's most likely to be climate change. But regardless, like, people have this delusion, they have children, because it gives them hope for the future of humanity or whatever, when in reality they're just sentencing more people to experience the collapse and the bullshit. So, um, yeah, I guess that's sort of some thoughts about childhood that I have, and like why people have children, and like, I don't know, the irrational kind of Disney World stuff associated with that. So I'm going to call it a day and talk to you in the next one.